Hello and welcome to this episode of Talk the Talk, RTR-FM's weekly show about linguistics, the science of language. For the next hour, we're going to be bringing you language news, language and culture, and some great music. Maybe we'll even hear from you. My name's Daniel Midgley. I'm here with Ben Ainsley.
Good morning.
And Kylie Sturgis.
G'day, everyone.
On this episode, we're talking about whether grammar matters. What if I told you that having painfully correct grammar and spelling was more about snobbishness than about actually making sense? Would it make you feel mad, or would you feel liberated? Well, we are going to be watching our words on this episode of Talk the Talk.
Have we never actually done a codified show about how language policing is not good?
We keep hitting around it, but
we've never really
make the case.
We haven't bitten in, have we?
No.
We've got a T-shirt about a thing that we haven't done a show about. I'm glad we're rectifying it.
Well, that's where we're going to get it all out of our system, and long-time listeners will be able to read our minds, or my mind anyway. Mm-hmm. But there's something else that's kind of special. This is our 300th show.
Yeah.
300.
Get the T-shirt and celebrate with us. Yay.
We've bowled a perfect game.
Mm.
Yeah, but I feel like the show didn't really begin until it was we three.
It didn't coalesce out of stellar cloud dust.
Nope.
Either way, it's happy birthday to us, happy birthday to the station. If you have become a subscriber to the station, don't forget to fulfill your pledge and give us a shout out as well to the Talk the Talkers if you are supporting our show in particular. It would be awesome to not only celebrate 300 with you, but the celebration of RTR-FM's 40th as well.
Also, bragging rights. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of language policing, we better find out what's going on in the world of linguistics in the week gone past.
Our friend Margaret on Facebook and Pharaoh Cat on Twitter
Sup, Pharaoh Cat?
has sent us an article on the Voynich manuscript. Remember this?
Ooh, do I ever. The world's favourite not on acid trip text. I think that's a good description of the Voynich manuscript.
I've never had a good close look at it. All I've heard is
loose.
that, it's been kind of solved-ish. And I'm like, that's nice.
For the sake of the listeners, the Voynich manuscript has potentially been solved, at least so some headlines say in Facebook news feeds. And I saw one of these headlines pop up in my news feed. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to click on that. I'm not going to click on that because...
Then you would know something.
Well, A...
Going in.
Right, which is just not how I roll at all.
No.
B, ignorance is my cloak. But B, I was like, I don't trust that headline.
Good.
Voynich manuscript solved. I'm like, you know what? You know what I need? I need my own pocket linguist. Oh, I'm going to be running him later on today.
Yeah, when I saw Voynich manuscript solved, I just thought, again?
Some headliner maker out there just thought, this is an easy way to sum it up. There. Solved.
Spicy.
It's a 600-year-old document. It's written in a strange script. It's got pictures of bathing women and stars and plants, and it's never been deciphered. So one idea is that it's actually a real document. We just don't know what to do with it. And another possibility is it's just a hoax. Somebody invented it, concocted it, and it's just gibberish.
It's just nonsense.
But it was to make somebody think that they had the special knowledge.
That's what came to mind when I heard it. It was that maybe someone had created thinking, this will fool all the folks. They'll be puzzling over this one for ages.
And they are.
Who was the walrus? That kind of thing.
Well, have you got a skeptical take on this, like whether it's real or fake?
Well, obviously, if it's been unsolved for quite some time, as it were, you're going to have to step into it in a skeptical mindset. You're going to be saying, okay, well, what's the background of these people? What techniques have they used? Is it something that has been used in other kinds of solutions to other kinds of manuscripts? What have we got?
Well, people have been bashing away at the Voynich manuscript lately using computational techniques. Kevin Knight has a really good set of slides that I'm throwing up on our blog, talkthetalkpodcast.com. The case that it's real goes something like this. We have heard of Zipf's law. The idea behind it is that the second most common word in a language, and that's any human language, the second most common word is going to be half as frequent as the most common word.
Right.
And the third most common word will be 1/3 as frequent as the most common word. And that's just the
and that's
way...
how language works.
That's the way it shakes out. Do the words in the Voynich manuscript follow Zipf's law? Yes, they do.
Okay. Oh, good. So that's a great sign. Okay.
Yeah, okay, fine. But
That doesn't mean you haven't just transliterated real stuff into not real stuff.
well, it suggests that it means something.
Right.
Okay.
It's not just gibberish. But here's the weird thing. In most languages, there are pairs of words that occur very frequently, like in the, or on my, or your mum.
But, but not here.
But not here. The Voynich manuscript doesn't seem to have repeated sequences of 2 or 3 words.
Interesting.
Okay, so weird. Okay, so this new take is by history researcher Nicholas Gibbs, who thinks it's a guide to women's health. After all, it does have a lot of bathing women, and people used to think that bathing was the cure for a lot of things.
Well,
Nothing like a good bath,
Yeah, it's
that's
not
for
totally
certain.
incorrect.
He thought of some other books that have this kind of thing, like the Trotula and the De Balnes Putiolanis, and these are like from the 1700s, 1500s, 1200s. Now, his guide to solving it is that he thinks that all the letters are not letters in a word. They're actually abbreviations for words.
Ah, okay.
And you might have seen the graphic in connection with this story where it's got his translation, and it's got a letter, and then what that is an abbreviation for, and then the next letter and what that's an abbreviation for.
That doesn't solve the pairs of words problem, though. So if you're just using abbreviations, even if you're rockin' our brev, you totes brev would go together, right? You'd see lots of totes brevs.
Well, actually, it's a pretty good explanation for why we're not seeing any repeated sequences of words. Because remember, the words in the Voynich manuscript, according to Gibbs, aren't words. They're actually sentences. Every character is a word in a sentence.
Ah.
So if we don't see any repeating words, that makes sense because I don't repeat sentences that I say over and over again.
Well, then how does Zipf's law work then?
It doesn't.
It doesn't. Oh, of course not. It wouldn't.
It wouldn't.
No, because the most common sentence is not twice as most common as the second most common sentence.
Right. This darn thing.
Man, somewhere, right, is an ancient, decrepit, hermity monk who's just like,
I was intrigued by how it seemed to have a recipe format replicated throughout the manuscript. The modern day equivalent of, right, lavender soap, Epsom salts, glass of wine, dark chocolate, good book, don't forget the candles, heat. Okay, I'm making that up a
That's
bit.
no worse than any other recipe I've heard.
Yeah. And not a name in sight. If the manuscript is apparently incomplete, the folios are in the wrong order. What it may need is an index.
okay.
So that you know which parts to read.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. There are lots and lots of claims of decoding the Voynich manuscript on the internet.
Yeah.
But everybody who claims to have settled this uses, I'll just borrow from Kevin Knight here a little bit. He says that all the claims of people who've solved this thing, they use arbitrary scramblings, they rearrange the letters, they say,
well, that's not good.
it says something as long as you do look at it this way.
Okay, Bible code, anyone?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is why this claim that, it's in the wrong order and I just need the index to be able to solve it. This sounds like another rearrangement solution.
Ah.
There's two things that are bugging me. Remember how it was like an abbreviation, like this character means lavender soap and that character means hot bath?
Well, we should be seeing a whole bunch of repeated characters, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
hot
we
baths
should.
everywhere.
I mean, we kind
They're
of
great.
do. I mean, they do appear over and over again because they had the same remedies for different illnesses. But if you look at his graphic, there's one thing that's never abbreviated, and that's and.
Oh,
Ah.
E-T, et. At least it looks like kind of like an E and kind of like a T. But that would be weird. What language works like that, where you abbreviate all of the longish things, but you don't abbreviate the short things? That would be odd.
It would be odd, but it's not like there aren't odd languages out there.
Man,
I mean, Latin's pretty kooky.
and why hasn't he published this? Where's the publication out of this?
So glad I was skeptical on this one because I literally saw people like being, oh my God, you guys, the Voynich manuscript's been cracked. My brain was just sitting there, be like, it's too good to be true. It's too good. It's too good to be true.
Do an internet search for Voynich manuscript decoded, just those 3 words, and you'll get citations from, one day ago. You'll get some from 2014, from 2011, back.
what are your thoughts on it ever being solved? Are we ever going to know the recipe for the best kind of hot bath for when you're feeling bad? If that is what it's about, if it is.
If we're going to declare this case closed, we're going to have some way of knowing if the translation is right. Remember, we don't even know what language this is in, what it was meant to refer to. So if somebody says they know what it is, their evidence is going to have to be super tight. I'd like to call for restraint. Many people have claimed to have decoded the Voynich manuscript, so when you hear it's been deciphered yet again, be skeptical.
Sold. Well, now that we've had the Voynich manuscript being solved yet again, shall we take a track?
Yeah, let's listen to Verge Collection with Postcodes on RTR-FM 92.1. You know, you can get those comments to us. We'd love to hear your view on this.
You can get in touch with us a bunch of different ways. You can give us a call, 9260-9210.
You can email us, talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.au.
Hit us up on social media. We've got a Facebook page. Just look for Talk the Talk Podcast. And certainly on the Twitters, #RTRFM and TalkRTR.
And this week, we are finally dipping our feet into the big old pool of being a language snob.
Are you a language snob?
I am a reformed language snob, Daniel, and I
Same,
do not
yeah.
mind to admit it because life is a journey. And I'm still on that journey. I'm still a bit racist, and I'm still a bit sexist, and I'm still a bit of a language snob, but I'm working on all of those things, and I'm happy to be called out when I do them wrong.
You know, I'm really glad that you say that because I really hope someday that language prejudice is just as unpalatable as other forms of prejudice.
Let's hope so.
How about you, Kylie? Where do you stand? You have been a teacher. You've had this. You've taught students. You've even taught ESL.
Yes, English is a second language. English is a second dialect. And honestly, it's some of the biggest hurdles, not only for students, but also teachers out there in order to try and be grammatically correct all the time and follow all the rules and trying to do the right thing by their writing and their communication. And I too have just come to the attitude of, okay, let's try not to sweat the small stuff too much. Let's just try to make sure that we can get the message out there. And it does mean, unfortunately, sometimes you're going to be less of a grammar snob than you should be, I think.
Should we at all?
Because we always have these little things over us. And I know that you've run classes, for example, outreach classes on grammar, and I've really dearly wanted to attend some of those because I thought, oh, this would be great because it's a fascinating field, but many of us have just been turned off grammar and turned off language courses by the overwhelming pressure to get it all right and know all the rules and what the hell is a post participle hanging cornerstone with 2 cherries and a whipped cream on top sort of attitude.
That really wandered there. It started
That's
really
what it feels
grammar.
like.
And
you
then
open it up and you go, oh.
Let's take a second and talk about what grammar is because it's important to discuss our terms. I usually talk about grammar in 2 senses. One is grammar in the broad sense.
Okay.
Getting the words in the right order.
Right. Not being like, car here, Ben, drive in.
Yeah.
Right?
I always say, I just ate 9 cupcakes, and I never say, just cup 9, I cakes 8. Because if I did that, it would be too confusing.
Oh, man. The next time I'm on drugs, Daniel, can you please just rock that out? Because my brain will crack in half.
Will I for you that?
Ah! God!
Okay. Now, that's the broad sense, but grammar in the narrow sense is kind of more what we're talking about. It's a knowledge of the little bitty rules that people say are important in writing. It's a knowledge of your there, and there. Mm-hmm. It's also the ability to know when you're supposed to use highfalutin language and when you're supposed to use lowfalutin language. I want to tell a story about someone named Gus. One time I was finishing up a show on Tuesday like I do, and there was a guy doing something in the RTR studio. And I went downstairs, he went downstairs, and he said, oh, hey, you're Daniel from Talk the Talk. And I was like, oh, crap, this never happens. Okay, fine. And he was kind of a working class guy. And the first thing he said, I really like your show. I don't have all the words. I don't feel like I use language properly, but I really enjoy your show.
Great.
Yeah, and I was like, did he say that because he speaks with, in a working class sort of way? He doesn't speak, because he didn't speak, standardized English.
This
like I
show
do.
isn't for me. It's for the people who know nouns and verbs and adjectives and tenses and don't curl up into a ball in the corner and cry when they hear those.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
For some reason, when people hear about language or grammar, they think, oh, I've got to use the highfalutin language all the time, otherwise I'm garbage.
Well, clearly, they've never listened to me rattle off a sentence.
So I told Gus, look, if you're feeling weird about the way that you speak in some situations, your language is fine. There's no problem. The problem with grammar snobbery and with language policing is that it puts people like Gus at a disadvantage for no good reason. If they want to get ahead, they have to learn to speak with a voice that they don't feel is authentically their own. And so in our discussion, I told Gus, don't let anybody make you feel bad about the way you talk. One more story. I was at a party, and I was explaining to someone that, the whole grammar thing really shouldn't be our emphasis, that if somebody uses non-standard grammar, it doesn't mean they're not smart or they're a dumb person. And this fellow said, but does this reflect a kind of anti-intellectualism?
No.
In the age...
Can I stop it there and say no? No. Sorry, please.
Well, why
Keep
not?
going.
Why not?
Well...
Is this a celebration of mediocrity?
Does it reflect an anti-intellectualism?
The dumbing down of language?
No, I don't think it does. And the reason I don't think it does is because exercising a high register of spoken or written speech is an artifact of a privilege of education. To say that it is tied to intellectualism, i.e. human endeavor, because that's kind of what I hear when people say, oh, we're dumbing stuff down. We're essentially no longer reaching. I don't think that's a fair statement to lay at the foot of a person whom, due to the lottery of birth, has not had access to education. That doesn't seem like a apples to apples comparison to me.
Okay, now I can understand that if we're talking about like saying it didn't do no good versus it didn't do any good.
Right.
Fine. What about spelling? Because spelling is one of those areas where loose and lose do look like different words, and its are different. One has an apostrophe, one doesn't. Surely we could be on solider ground here and say, well, we really need to keep those distinctions because those are the ones that are important.
Are they?
Well, that kind of takes us to an article in the New York Times by Farhad Manjoo. Trump consistently misspells things in his tweets, and then he deletes them and spells them correctly.
We've done entire shows about them.
We have.
I really want a Covfefe shirt.
And he was honored with an E to serve the American people.
Oh,
okay.
dear.
Okay.
Oh, see, there we go. See, there we go, right there.
There it is.
Bam,
right?
bam, 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 bam,
This
bam,
is
bam.
a totally normal.
Here's what I brought earlier.
Ding, 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 ding.
So his contention is that people equate certain things with correct spelling, and they shouldn't. Intelligence. Intelligent people can be bad spellers.
Absolutely.
They can be dyslexic.
Yep.
Social status and professionalism. Here's a comment on our Facebook page from Jeremy. He says, the president of the U.S. should absolutely have correct spelling in our society where spelling is valued and seen as a marker of professionalism. I know that anyone can be president, but even if the most uneducated person is elected president, professionalism is part of the role.
But see, okay, there, and there. I can figure out which there that word means by context every single time because that's what I do whenever anyone speaks the word at me.
Not a problem.
Right? I can't help but feel that it's, with or without an apostrophe, is probably going to work the same way because every time someone says, wow, Ben, it's a really hot day, I know exactly what they're saying!
And when you see it on signs and so on, even though your hand might be twitching for the marker in order to correct the apostrophe, you still know that it's Joe's shop.
When someone writes could of, that's the kind of thing that you would never notice if somebody's saying it. But now we're writing things on the internet to each other. We have a lot of written speech, and we're noticing everybody's mistakes and judging each other a lot.
Covfefe!
So I guess my riposte to your party conversationalist would be perhaps, and I think it is probably a perhaps. I mean, there is anti-intellectualism that is sweeping certain parts of the world. I think that person is identifying a real thing. I would fire back with, are we not just as guilty of pariahing anyone who has not had access to education by the system that I guess my question to him would be, is it a if this, then that situation, right? Do we have to have a walled garden where things are correct or they're not? And that's what intellectualism is. And anyone who isn't lucky enough to be born into a life that has access to that garden, well, I'm sorry, but the garden's very pretty and we don't want to lower the garden standard, so you're just going to have to stay outside.
It's a logical fallacy of false dichotomy, after all.
And the other thing that I just want to point out from a historical perspective is that this whole thing about there only being one way to spell a word, it's kind of new.
Yes.
It's kind of new.
Yeah, that's been in vogue only for a little while.
A couple hundred years.
Yeah.
So what Manju is saying is we just need to chill out on this thing and we need to uncouple intelligence and privilege and opportunity from spelling. Stop thinking that your bad spelling friend is a dumbass. They're probably not.
And it's entirely possible you might find a joy in grammar after all if you have that attitude. You may actually find yourself being more encouraged to get into unpacking the rules and using the rules if you don't feel like you're going to be judged so much if you get the rules wrong.
Now that we've hopefully articulated a side of the argument that will make grammar snobs kind of go, oh, I never thought about it that way before, which is what happened to me when I started doing the show. Why don't we take a track?
Yeah, let's listen to Spellbreaker by Ulrich Schnaus and Jonas Monk on RTR-FM 92.1.
And on this week's episode of Talk the Talk, we are digging our teeth into something that we've talked around a whole lot, but we've never actually devoted a show to: language policing.
It sucks, and let me tell you why it sucks.
Tell us what you really think, Daniel.
Go on, Daniel.
A lot of grammar rules are just made up.
Isn't that always true?
No, well, some arise naturally.
Okay.
Like the whole thing about saying red house instead of house red.
Okay.
People just do it, and they don't know why, but they just do it.
Unless they speak a different language.
Unless they speak a different language.
In
Then they
which
say
case
house red.
Yeah.
Okay, but a lot of grammar rules that you'll learn in school, like don't say literally in a non-literal sense, or don't end a sentence with a preposition, or
Never boldly go where no man has gone before.
don't split infinitives, right? Those are just made up. People just thought that was a good idea.
Are we able to forensically sort of suss out where some of these rules come to us from? Because my brain says some bloody style guide somewhere is the progenitor, not one, but like maybe we get this rule from the New York Times style guide from like 1910, and we get this rule from the Oxford English Press from 1805, and have we just cobbled together all of these dumb rules from dumb publications that was literally probably one guy going, you know, I've never cared for hearing that word after the other word, so I'm making up a rule for my university's style guide.
That is, in fact, exactly how we get some of these words.
Well, guess man.
Yes! Oh, man.
Here's the made-up grammar rule. You're supposed to say fewer things instead of less things.
Right, so it should be the 12 items or fewer lane rather than the 12 items or less lane.
Except that everybody in English has been saying less things since Alfred the Great in 800s.
Right.
Wow.
We know that one guy, Robert Baker, who was a writer, and he wrote, this word, less, is most commonly used in speaking of a number where I should think fewer would do better. I should think?
Can we just put it out there? Like, I actually almost perfectly imitated that douchebag.
Yeah, exactly. And people believed him. And so now we have this stupid rule that nobody actually does, but you're supposed to do it, or at least someone at the editing center will pull you up on it and say, no, do it the other way.
Or that particular snooty friend of yours will be like, you know, it's supposed to be 12 items or fewer. And you'll just be like, God, Daryl, just shut up.
I'm going to put this unidentified item in the bagging area right where the scanner don't shine. I can tell you that much.
So that's what I mean when I say that a lot of grammar rules are not for the purpose of clarity or logic or communication. It's just to separate people into certain bins like smart versus dumb or good versus bad or high class versus none. Speaking of class, let's talk about education. Is there any benefit to teaching students grammar?
So I've been thinking about this a lot recently because it's hard. And I think Kylie's probably going to be able to sit with me on this one, or at least empathize with my position, because you want to, and I've spoken about this, long-time listeners in the show will know my tactic is to teach kids how to code switch, right? My thing is like, it doesn't make you smarter, but the world is full of idiots who will think you're smarter if you can talk this way or write this way. So why not use their dumbness against them and their judgmentalism against them and learn how to use the high register for exactly what you want to do.
Yeah, I really like that approach because students need to have a knowledge of code switching. But let's talk about teaching traditional grammar like nouns and verbs and adjectives.
Because there's been a resurgence, hasn't there?
There sure has. The ACARA curriculum has been loaded up with lots and lots of traditional grammar terms.
For those outside of Australia, the ACARA curriculum is basically the national framework of like, here's what you teach the kiddies.
Yep, and it's full of nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. And this is a real challenge for teachers who never got this traditional...
got taught that. I certainly didn't.
No.
I went to so many schools that I never really had the opportunity, and all the training I did ended up just being due to A, passion, and B, I need this in order to teach more effectively.
Okay, now, data. All right. Show me the data, Daniel. Are we shoehorning this into curriculum for any good reason whatsoever?
Gosh. Well, I like it for only one reason, and that is that it's linguistic and it helps you to get good at linguistic analysis.
Right. So are you coming at it from the point of view of now at least people won't first start learning how language works when they try and learn their second language?
Exactly.
Okay.
But many people are of the opinion that teaching traditional grammar to students makes them better at writing.
False.
Absolutely false. If anything, it has no effect or even makes them worse writers.
Interesting. And I would put it out there that one of the stodgy aspects of academia is that there seems to be a culture of just really boring writing, and it doesn't have to be there. You don't have to write boringly if you're writing about technical things. It's like, you can do this! It's possible!
I think it is a real talent to be able to write in a manner that seems appropriately formal and yet is still engaging.
So here's the thing, right? Like, that's the person who learns all the rules so that they know exactly when and where to break them.
And you learn that by being a good reader.
Yes, a voracious book addict.
Yeah.
But not just good reading. I mean, there's plenty of teachers out there like you and me who are really keen readers, and yet that may not translate necessarily into being good with grammar. And so you also have to get into the effort of practicing as well, maybe even imitating some of these texts, critically analysing some of these favourite texts of yours and saying, okay, well, how come I find that so engaging? So you've got to do a bit of an overlap.
I found an article in the New York Times, Why Kids Can't Write by Dana Goldstein, and it had some suggestions for how to help.
They had two examples of concrete strategies that can help students in terms of writing tests. First of all, transcribing by hand and being familiar with computer literacy, so using your laptop, using your PC. And another thing, before writing paragraphs, you have to practice writing great sentences as well. Break it down. Start having a look at getting more feedback on your writing, be more encouraged. Have a look at what successful writing is, and in examples where you have students who are doing better, it's because they've got a cohort that are seeing great examples, imitating. Jan Mark, for example, the children's author, suggested that one of the things that led her to become an award-winning writer, for example, was due to the fact that she was reading great literature out there and then rewriting it in her own style, turning, for example, The Hobbit and making her own little story or adventure that she would have had in the everyday, more like a Hobbit-like adventure. And so she's exposing herself to different styles. And no matter what happens, get confidence in your writing ability by getting good feedback is vitally important. When you get it right, get reinforcement.
There are lots of ways to teach good writing, but very few of them actually involve the teaching of traditional grammar. Getting students to write well is a lot more complicated than just saying, here's a noun and here's a verb. Well, look, I hope we've made the case that grammar snobbery and grammar policing is bad. It's true that we need to teach students how to code switch. And yes, we need to teach them standard English because that's a skill that they're going to need to use in formal situations when it's appropriate. But we also need to teach them that what is considered appropriate can never be entirely separated from considerations of power and prestige. So let's keep that in mind. Well, let's take a track now, and this one is going to be Spell It Out by Toro et Moi on RTR FM 92.1.
Well, I say I ain't never seen a word as new and ugly in these parts as you. You must be word of the week.
I'm not sure if it's really polite to do that in front of an American. How do you feel?
But that's quite all right because, we're talking about Texas.
Yeah. Oh, are we really?
Yeah, we are.
I'm 2 for 2.
Well done.
Yep. Lately, the US of A has been seeing a spate of weird weather.
I wonder what could possibly be causing that.
If only there was some kind of science that could tell us.
Here's a clue, not the gays.
Well, she's not wrong, ladies and gentlemen.
We've seen Hurricane Harvey followed by Hurricane Irma in Florida. We hope that everybody is as okay as can be under the circumstances. I want to ask a question. What is the difference between a hurricane, a tornado, a cyclone, and a typhoon?
Okay, I reckon I can have a stab at this.
All right, do you want to do it by explaining it to me, or do you think that you can pass the Daniel Midgley challenge?
I can pass the Daniel Midgley challenge.
You can do it. Come
I
on.
have taken those 4 terms, hurricane, tornado, cyclone, and typhoon, and I want to know if you can match them up with their definitions in the WordNet dictionary.
Okay, I can do this. Okay.
Ben, here's yours. Kylie, here's yours.
Okay, hold on.
Hurricane, tornado, cyclone, typhoon. Okay, you
Right.
got those in that order, and then here we go. And so we put them out. No, that's that one. That one's okay.
Done.
So, Kylie, what's a typhoon?
A typhoon is a tropical cyclone occurring in the Western Pacific or Indian Oceans.
That is
Ding.
the correct definition.
Yep, got that.
Okay, Ben, what's a cyclone?
A cyclone is actually the thing that sits behind a typhoon and a hurricane. It's just a violently swirling windstorm.
A violently rotating windstorm is the correct answer. Oh, Kylie, you haven't got that one
I
right.
had it wrong. I thought a tornado was the violently rotating windstorm.
Ben, what's a tornado?
A tornado is a localized and violently destructive windstorm occurring over land characterized by a funnel-shaped cloud extending towards the ground. Oh, that's right. Twister's one of my very favorite films.
And that leaves hurricane.
A severe tropical cyclone, usually with heavy rains and winds moving at 63 to 136 knots, or 12 on the Beaufort scale.
Ben, you are 4 for 4.
Ben is our winner. Everyone on Ben Team Ben, you can cheer.
Precisely, no one was, because everyone likes to see the competitive guy lose.
Well, let's talk about the origins of some of these words.
Okay.
There's tornado, which comes from Spanish tronada, which means thunderstorm. To thunder is tronar, and it comes straight from Latin tonare.
Okay.
So originally it wouldn't have been a tornado, it would have been a tronado.
Tornado.
But because of Spanish tornar, to turn, it changed from a tronado to a tornado.
Oh, that's cool. I
Yeah,
like that. A little, what would we call that? A cognate? Like a little similar little thing?
We would call it metathesis.
Metathesis.
That's like swapping a sound, like ask and axe.
Oh, okay.
Totally normal in languages.
Right.
Okay, then typhoon. I went down a rabbit hole for this one.
Cool.
So there's a Greek word, typhon, which is whirlwind, and also Typhon was the god who was the father of all monsters.
Oh.
So ancient Greek, right?
Yeah, right.
So already, kind of badass.
Yep.
So it looks like Greek is responsible, but hold on. There's also a word, tufan, which is a word in Arabic, Persian, and Hindi, which means big cyclonic storm.
Oh.
The word typhoon appears in English in 1588 from a translation of an Italian person. So that's where,
Who's complaining why his entire merchant fleet didn't exist anymore?
right. But it appeared even earlier in 1560 in Portuguese. There's a book called Pinto's Journey, and Pinto says that this word is invented by the Chinese.
Wow.
Okay, so now we jump over to Chinese and we see Cantonese Dai Feng, a great wind.
Right.
So here's what probably happened. Greek speakers were talking about typhon. At the same time, Cantonese speakers, possibly coincidentally, originated a very similar word
Right.
for the thing. Arabic speakers picked it up from the Chinese. From there, the Portuguese picked it up, and then it got into English, where the Greek speakers already had it, and they might have influenced the way that the word appeared. What a journey. It's
yeah.
like 2 different etymologies that converge. What do you call a little tiny tornado that raises a lot of dust?
A willy willy.
A
Yes,
willy willy.
in Australia, yeah.
The Australian linguist Bob Dixon thinks that this comes from the Yindyabarndi language of Western Australia, where it occurs just like that, willy willy. What else do you call it?
Dust devil.
Yeah, that's the term that I knew growing up, a dust devil. You should check out the Wikipedia page for dust devil, because dust devils look kind of cute and tiny, but they're actually super dangerous.
Really?
For airplanes.
Oh.
There have been some fatalities. And they're also very dangerous for skydivers because they can collapse your chute.
Yes, which bizarrely happened to my best friend's stepdad just like last week, and he shattered both his ankles. How bizarre is that?
Gosh, was he okay besides the ankles?
Well, he's bedridden for like a couple of months, but he is alive, and that's great.
They also can blow nasty spores around, and if you breathe them, you can get fungal pneumonia.
Oh, yeah.
That is disgusting.
And then I want to get to our final word of the week, and that is, this comes from a friend of mine who lives in Laredo, Texas, and they had one of these back in May before all of this hurricane stuff, a downburst.
A downburst. Oh, is this the air that goes shaboosh
That's
on the ground?
The one. It's an enormous column there that goes straight down and then out.
That's bizarre. Imagine that, right? Imagine just be standing outside and everything going really still for a second and being like, okay, can you guys hear any like birds or insects? No, that's really freaky. You really freaked out. Oh, there's air coming from directly above me.
Kaboosh!
That would be terrifying.
And if there's rain in it, then it's a rain bomb.
Oh, wow.
There's some video of this happening in Queensland, really intense. Formed by analogy with cloud burst. You take cloud burst from like 1817 is when that first appeared.
I still drink coconut. Sorry.
That's cloud busting. And then you just take the burst and add it to down, and you've got a downburst.
Wow.
So, a lot of weather-related words of the week.
Yeah, well, that's on my bucket list. Okay, great. Well, now we know the roots behind the words that are currently destroying parts of the world.
Stay safe, everybody.
Indeed.
Stay safe. Yes.
Shall we take a track?
Yes, let's listen to Lemon Jelly with Nice Weather for Ducks on RTR-FM 92.1.
I'm going to get out of here. Kylie and Daniel are going to stay around and answer your questions as per all the mechanisms that you know how to get in touch with us. Toodaloo.
Nice Weather for Ducks by Lemon Jelly. Good fun, isn't it?
It's hilarious. I want to learn more.
Let's see. Lots of great feedback on this episode. Let's start with Clive. Clive says that he's given up on all of the ticky grammar rules like less and fewer, and he feels much happier.
Oh, good for you. It's
Because of this.
therapeutic. Yeah.
I think so too. He says it's a bit like reading For the Term of His Natural Life, and I don't know this book. Do you?
Marcus Clarke, the story of a convict who was transported to Australia for a crime he didn't commit, and
weren't they all?
Yeah, and essentially all about the harsh and inhumane treatment and how he battles on, and all about based on the settlement in Port Arthur, Tasmania.
But he uses language in a non-standard way in the book that he writes?
Well, yeah, because what we're seeing here is a change in language from, the standard, what you might expect of the upper class English, the convicts who are the lower class, and then, heading over to Australia. So it's reflecting that.
Well, Clive says if you focus on the details of that and say, well, that's not standard English, then he says you miss the book.
It's an amazing story, yeah.
Well, I think that this really pertains to life, right? Because if you're sitting there in all your conversations and going, blah, he didn't say that right, and I'm a big jerk and I know what everybody should do and everybody should do what I say, then it's super boring.
Yeah.
But if you can say, oh, wow, that person says something different than the way I say it, then that's really interesting.
Just think of how much music we play on RTR FM you would miss out on if you said, no, it all has to be standard.
Steve says, English is a language with lots of influences. It's a big tumble dryer sort of thing. You just throw everything in there and mix it around and that's English. He says, the poetry of E.E. Cummings is a really good example of ignoring grammar rules, making your own, I guess.
Not even the rain has such small hands.
Paul says when he was 12 years old, growing up in a working class neighborhood, he came home and referred to the country of Pakistan, but he said Pakistan, which I'm told that Democrats in the U.S. tend to say as opposed to Republican Pakistan.
Oh.
Just putting it out there.
Okay.
But he got slammed. His family slammed him and said, what do you think you're doing, coming in here with that? So there's a lot of grammar weirdness going both ways, kind of the anti-snobbery, kind of the prestige on the one side, but then the vernacular pressure on the other side, what they call covert prestige. And Martin's email, he says, grammar, I used to give miles of Fs about grammar when I was younger, but now I speak 2 languages and swap between them all the time, and the words switch easily back and forth, but grammar takes a little more time to adjust to the language requested by the brain. And as such, I've become completely open to any attempt of communication as long as the message comes across. I want to disagree a little bit, just a tiny bit, because of the way we communicate complicate matters. But like I said in an earlier episode, we got to approach this from two angles. We've got to say, fight language policing, because that harms people, but at the same time, help people to become good code switchers because then they can play the game.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, tell you what, I think we're just about out of time for our 300th show.
300, we made it.
Yay.
Woo! Make sure you check out our Facebook page, check out all the extras we post there. Celebrate our 300th with us. Support the show, support RTRFM.
And be sure to keep listening to Mark Neal, who's taking us out to lunch pretty soon. Thanks for listening. And until next time, keep talking.
This has been an RTRFM podcast. RTRFM is an independent community radio station that relies on listeners for financial support. You can subscribe online at rtrfm.com.au/subscribe.
Our theme song is by R-Trees, and you can check out their music on rtrees.com and everywhere good music is sold.
We're on Twitter at TalkRTR. Send us an email, talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.au. And if you'd like to get lots of extra linguistic goodies, then like us on Facebook or check out our Patreon page. You can always find out whatever we're up to by heading to talkthetalkpodcast.com.